The first mistake was assuming they had nothing in common. The room was cold, but silent. It was supposed to be a quick meeting, a formality. The Prime Minister of India and the CEO of the world's largest tech company, sharing a few staged words. Before cameras. Nothing deep, nothing real. Just smiles and sound bites. But Sundar Pichai didn't smile as he walked in. And Narendra Modi didn't speak as he stood up to shake his hand. Both men just paused, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them was sure what to say. They sat down across from each other. There was no interpreter. There was no notepad. Just water glasses and silence. 3 minutes passed. No one spoke. But in that silence, something happened. They didn't look at their watches. They didn't check their phones. They didn't shift in their seats. It was the kind of silence that stripped away everything but presence. The silence of two men who had spent years at the top, carrying the weight of millions. And now, in this quiet, they saw not power in the other's eyes, but burden. Outside, aides waited anxiously. Photographers peeked through the glass doors. Was this a disaster? Had something gone wrong? Inside, Sundar's fingers slowly curled around the base of his glass. He didn't lift it. He just breathed, deep, steady, and then his eyes drifted to Modi's, not with challenge, not with fear, just with something closer to tired respect. Modi tilted his head slightly. He looked older, up close, not in a weak way, in a human way, the kind of old that comes from thousands of speeches, millions of steps, and the kind of silence that follows you when the crowd disappears. Then Sundar spoke, but it wasn't a sentence. It was a story, and it started like this. I was 11, he said, barely above a whisper. We didn't have a phone, but one of my friends got one, and I would sit outside his house just to hear it ring. Modi didn't blink, didn't smile, just listened. I didn't know what email was, Sundar continued. I just knew that, somewhere, in a world far away, people were sending words through light. His voice was calm, almost like he wasn't speaking to the Prime Minister of India, but to someone who would understand without needing explanation. My father, Sundar said, he used to tell me, you don't need everything, you just need one chance. And, if you get it, don't waste it on pride. Modi looked down at his own hands. He had been told stories like that too, but in fields, not tech parks, in dusty towns, not boardrooms. And suddenly, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. It felt earned, because Sundar wasn't bragging, he wasn't performing, he was remembering, and Narendra. Modi respected that. Then Modi spoke. His voice was rougher, deeper, used to shouting over crowds, but now, quiet. When I was a boy, he said slowly, I would help my father sell tea at the station. Sometimes I watched trains leave, thinking, maybe one day, I will be on one of them. Sundar nodded, because they both knew what it was like to be on the outside, to look through a window and think, that world is not for me. And yet here they were, on opposite ends of a table, but somehow meeting in the same memory. Do you ever feel, Sundar asked, like you're still proving you belong? Modi didn't answer quickly. He looked at the glass in front of him, untouched. Then he said, every morning. It wasn't self-pity. It wasn't shame. It was just honest, and in that honesty, something shifted. The glass walls felt less cold, the silence less heavy, and the cameras outside. They didn't matter anymore, because what passed between them wasn't for show. It was a reminder that sometimes, two men can sit in silence and speak volumes, not through headlines, not through power, but through stories, through memories, through the quiet truth that no one sees when you're at the top. That sometimes, the weight of success feels heavier than the climb. Modi leaned forward and said, they think we stopped. Struggling. Sundar looked up. They don't see the hours, the nights, the cost. They don't see the loneliness, Sundar added, Modi's jaw tightened, then relaxed. They see strength, he said. They don't see the scars it took to earn it. And for a moment, there were no titles. Not Prime Minister, not CEO, just two boys who had once sat in the heat, waiting for a dream to knock on their door. And now, after all the noise, all the applause, they finally had a moment of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because someone else understood, and that, more than anything, was what passed. Between them, not words, not deals, but understanding. And sometimes, that's the rarest thing of all. They left the meeting room quietly. No press, no grand statement. Just a soft nod between two men who understood each other without needing to explain anything. No one outside the room knew what had passed between them, but something had changed, and both felt it. Sundar Pichai walked through the hallway like a man carrying something invisible. It wasn't a burden. It was something heavier than that, something sacred. A memory, maybe, or a question he hadn't asked himself in years. He had been in rooms with presidents and billionaires, but this was different. He had just sat across from someone who didn't speak in metrics or strategy, but in lived truth. Meanwhile, Narendra Modi stepped into his car, hands folded in his lap, staring out the window without speaking. His security team noticed. His aide tried to ask if everything went well. He just nodded once and said quietly, "He's still listening." The next day, the headlines were business as usual. Tech summit, successful. New investments. Partnerships on the table. The photographs showed both men smiling, but none of those stories captured what had really happened. And then came the moment that tested it all. A crisis, one that couldn't be solved with speeches. A school in southern India had lost internet access entirely after a violent storm destroyed towers across the region. It wasn't just one village, it was 5 districts. Thousands of students were now cut off from online learning, digital libraries, coding courses, and for many of them, this was their only window to a better life. The local officials blamed infrastructure, the engineers blamed the weather, the politicians blamed the system, but no one acted until a small story broke out. A 12-year-old girl named Nivi walked 3 kilometers to reach the edge of a working signal zone. She carried a handwritten letter in her school bag addressed to Sundar Pichai. The note simply said, "We don't want charity. We just want the chance to learn. Please, don't forget us. I want to become like you." The image of her letter went viral within hours, but Sundar didn't post a response. He picked up the phone and called Modi directly, not through staff, not through formal chains, just a direct call. "We need to fix this," Sundar said. Modi didn't hesitate. "I already spoke with the local minister, but they're slow. Let's do it together." And just like that there was movement. Sundar didn't wait for bureaucracy. He rerouted engineers from nearby Google data centers. He told them, "Don't look at cost. Look at her handwriting. That's your blueprint." Modi didn't wait for approval. He authorized the Indian Air Force to assist in transporting satellite equipment to remote areas. "We fly for national security," he told them, "but today, education is our security." Within 72 hours, the first connection line was restored. But it wasn't just about internet. It was about dignity. NIVI, single quotes, S school, didn't just receive a hotspot. They received a message that said, "Your voice matters." On the day connection returned Sundar, and Modi didn't organize a press conference. Instead, they both showed up quietly on a video call with the children of the school. NIV. I was too shocked to speak. She looked at Sundar through the screen, eyes wide. He smiled and said softly, "I read every word." And then Modi added, "And I remembered every step." For 3 minutes. They let the children speak, some in broken English, some in shy Tamil, but all with heart. They spoke about dreams, about becoming engineers, doctors, poets. One boy said he wanted to build his own app, so kids wouldn't have to walk so far to learn. And as he said that, Sundar's eyes watered, because once upon a time, that had been him. When the call ended, there was silence again. Not between Sundar and Modi, but in both of them, a quiet that comes after doing the right thing, without expecting applause. Back in Delhi, Modi turned to his aide and said, "Sometimes, the most powerful meetings have no cameras." In California, Sundar stood alone in his office and whispered, "I didn't forget, Dad." But this was just the beginning. The next twist came from somewhere neither of them expected, because the more light you shine, the more shadows start moving, and not everyone wanted that connection to last. The storm came quietly. Not the one with thunder and rain, but the kind that moves through offices and whispers. In locked-door meetings, in carefully timed emails, and vague memos. It started with a phone call. An advisor to a foreign telecom giant rang Sundar Pichai's assistant late one evening. The voice was polite, too polite. It offered congratulations on the touching gesture toward the Indian school. But it quickly shifted. "You understand," the caller said, "when you bypass local telecom protocols, it creates ... complications, especially for stakeholders." Sundar didn't respond directly. He let the silence stretch. He knew what this was. Behind the polished words was a simple message: stay in your lane. Meanwhile in Delhi, Modi's office received a different kind of pressure. Not from abroad, but from within. A senior bureaucrat handed Modi a thin file labeled, "Unauthorized. Actions Satellite Interference Risk." Modi flipped through the pages. Each page was filled with technical jargon and policy breaches, but none of them mentioned NIVI. None mentioned the students. Just rules, politics, optics. He closed the file, slowly, and asked one question: who benefits if we stop? The room went silent. No one answered, because the answer was clear. Companies that controlled regional infrastructure, politicians who owned stakes in private telecom firms, middlemen who made their living delaying progress. These were the people who profited from broken systems, and now Sundar and Modi had disrupted all of it. But neither of them had expected what would happen next. The smear campaign began. Small stories at first. A blogger accusing Sundar of using India to boost his image. An article suggesting Modi had politically manipulated a young girl's story. Anonymous posts claiming the video call was staged. The headline spread faster than truth. Some newspapers ran both sides, truth and doubt, printed on the same page. But for many, the damage was done. NIV, single quotes as schools started receiving calls from news outlets. Her teacher, Mr. Arun, begged them to stop. "She's just a child," he said. "She wrote a letter, that's all." But the noise grew louder. The head of the education board issued a statement saying the situation was under review. Sundar watched it all unfold. His team advised him to fall back. Let it pass. The story would die down. But Sundar couldn't forget Nivi's face on the screen, the way her voice trembled with hope. So, he made a decision. No press, no drama, just action. He wrote a letter, and not to the government, not to the media, to the children. He sent tablets to 10 schools in that district, not as charity, but as tools. Each one had a welcome message on it. It read, "You matter. We hear you, and we believe in what you will become." When Modi found out, he didn't call Sundar. He simply sent a message that said, "Keep going." Then he did something unusual. He called the bureaucrat who handed him the file. He asked him to visit the school personally. "No orders," Modi said. "Just sit there and listen." The man obeyed, and what he saw changed him. Children coding in silence, teachers explaining new tools, NIV standing tall, helping others set up their devices. When he returned to Delhi, he didn't submit a new file. He submitted a report titled, "The Future Arrived Early." But the resistance wasn't over. At the next International Tech Summit, Sundar was scheduled to speak. Before he stepped on stage, An advisor warned him. There are people here who want to corner you. They will question your ethics, your methods. Sundar nodded and walked to the stage anyway. But instead of charts or data, he opened with this. I'm not here to defend a company. I'm here to protect a promise. The room fell quiet. A girl in a small village walked miles with a question. Does anyone care? He paused. We answered yes, and I would do it again. In Delhi, Modi watched the live stream alone. He didn't clapped out, he just smiled, because he knew the cost of standing up, and he knew Sundar had just chosen it not for applause, but for the children watching in silence, waiting for someone to believe in them. But outside that moment of courage, something darker was brewing. A powerful business group, one that had quietly lost control of regional towers after the satellite initiative, began lobbying aggressively. They wanted contracts back, and they wanted to send a message. They couldn't touch Sundar easily, but they had another plan. They targeted the girl. They came dressed in politeness, men in clean shirts, with soft voices and sharper intentions. They arrived at Nivi's village in white cars, with tinted windows. No badges, no threats, just words coded in fake concern. We're just here to follow up on the tablet program, one man said. We're trying to see how we can help your family. Another added, her father, a quiet man who worked at the sugarcane mill, stood in the doorway with tired eyes. He didn't trust their smiles, but poverty teaches you not to turn people away too quickly. So he listened. But when they started asking about his political views, and whether he had signed any statements or talked to the press, something inside him turned cold. We don't know politics, he said. We just want our daughter to study. The next day he was told he might lose his job. No reason given, just whispers. Too much attention, too many questions. Nivi didn't understand why her father came home early and sat in silence. She didn't understand why her mother avoided looking at her, but she knew something had shifted. Her school stopped mentioning her name. During morning assembly, the teacher who once praised her now avoided her eyes, and one afternoon, someone spray-painted her name on the school wall with the word propaganda written beside it. NIV. I cried that night, not because she understood what was happening, but because everything that once felt like light was now casting shadows. And then, the story almost disappeared. The media moved on. New topics took over the headlines. The children went back to older computers. The signal grew weak. Again. And people around Nivi began whispering, this is why you shouldn't speak. But stories have a way of surviving, even when people try to bury them. One of Sundar's engineers, Dev, had kept a copy of Nivi's letter on his desk. He read it every morning before work. He hadn't forgotten, and when he noticed system, reports, showing the signal loss again in that district, he didn't just flag it. He booked a flight. When he arrived, the school was quiet. The new devices still worked, but no one touched them anymore. The children sat on mats, afraid to look up. Dev waited until class ended. He approached Nivi outside. Do you remember what you wrote? He asked gently. She nodded. Do you still mean it? Her lips trembled, but she said, yes. That was enough. Dad made a video, not staged, no music, just footage of the children learning. 9IV. Reading aloud from a book, her father fixing a chair. In the background. Dev uploaded it late one night, and within 24 hours, the internet did what it does best, amplify truth that refuses to die. The video spread across classrooms, teacher forums, and even landed in the inbox of someone unexpected. Narendra Modi. When he watched it, his expression didn't change, but the next morning, he cleared 30 minutes on his schedule, and he did something no one saw coming. He visited the village, not with cameras, not with journalists, just one vehicle, a simple kurta, and silence. When he walked into Nivi's school, the children didn't know what to do. He sat on the floor with them and said nothing for a while. Then he looked at Nivi and said, "I didn't forget." She nodded slowly. Then he turned to the teacher and asked, "Why did you stop calling her name?" The teacher looked down. Then Modi stood and said something no one expected. "If you silence the bright ones, who will light the path?" Before he left, he handed the principal a sealed envelope. It contained funding approval for a full digital lab, not just for that school, but 10 more in the region, and he made one quiet phone call before heading back to Sundar. He said only 2 words: "She's rising." Sundar knew exactly what he meant, and this time, he decided to go further. He didn't just support the school. He launched a program called One Light, One Letter. For every letter a child wrote, explaining their dream, one classroom would receive full digital support, no matter where it was. Within a week, 200 letters poured in, and behind each one was a small voice, refusing to be silenced again. But just as things began to shift, just when it felt like they had turned the tides, someone leaked internal government files to the media. Files about the satellite use. Files about Sundar's call logs with Modi. Files suggesting protocol violations. And with those leaks came a new firestorm, this time bigger, this time The headlines were everywhere. Data breach raises questions about Indian tech diplomacy, were rules bent for a single school? How far is too far when a CEO gets too close to power? What had begun as a quiet collaboration was now under a burning spotlight. Evening news panels filled with experts, analysts, and critics. Some questioned Sundar's judgment. Others criticized Modi for breaking protocol. A few hinted at political manipulation, but none of them mentioned Nivi. None of them showed her walking to school with her head bowed again. None of them showed her father, now jobless, trying to start a tea cart just to keep food on the table. And yet, it wasn't the noise that shook Sundar. It was the silence in his inbox. People he had worked with for years, silent partners who once called him visionary, now waiting to see which way the wind would blow. He sat in his California office, watching clips from the news, not angry, just disappointed, because all the world could see was controversy, but they didn't see the kids in the lab, the joy in their fingers when they typed their first line of code. And then came the moment of decision. His legal team brought him a document, a carefully written statement. It would distance him from the project. It would frame everything as a misunderstanding. It would protect the company's image. All he had to do was sign. He held the pen, stared at the paper, then pushed it away. "I won't apologize for listening," he said quietly. They warned him his board might take action. The markets might react. He just nodded. So be it. Meanwhile in Delhi, Modi was facing his own storm. Opposition leaders accused him of favoritism. Some demanded a parliamentary inquiry. News anchors replayed old speeches of his questioning whether his Chaiwala origin story had been weaponized to manipulate public emotion. His advisors begged him to give a diplomatic statement, but Modi refused. Instead, he called a press meet. And this time, he didn't go alone. He brought Nivi's teacher, her father, even Dev, the engineer who had filmed the silent video. And then he spoke, not from a podium, from the floor. There was no agenda, he said, voice steady. Only a letter. He held up Nivi's original letter in his hand. "We did not act because of politics. We acted because a child asked to be seen." He paused. "If that is a crime, then let me be the first to confess." The room went silent, and then someone clapped, then another dot, within seconds. The room echoed with applause, not out of loyalty, but out of recognition. They had all once asked to be seen. The next morning, Sundar received a message from his board. Chair. No statement was needed anymore, because the company's stocks had stabilized not because of silence, but because of integrity. Someone had started a campaign online. Hashtag Own a Dream and a tablet trended across the globe. Kids from different countries started writing their own letters, not just asking for technology, but sharing dreams. A girl in Uganda wrote about becoming an engineer. A boy in rural Brazil drew pictures of a device that could teach without power. A refugee child in Syria asked, "Can light cross borders?" And Sundar smiled, because he knew now the story was no longer his. It belonged to them. And Nivishi didn't go back to silence. She started a school club for young girls in tech. Her first meeting had 5 members, then 20, then 50, and one day, she stood in front of the group and said, "They tried to make me quiet, but you all kept listening, so I won't stop." Across the ocean, Modi visited another small school. No cameras, no headlines, just him, sitting with a girl who wanted to build machines that could fly. And when she asked him, "Will anyone believe in me?" he answered, "They already do." But as peace slowly returned and the storm passed, both Sundar and Modi received a letter, anonymous, no signature, just a few words, typed in bold, clear letters. "You moved too fast. Next time, we won't come quietly." It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Because progress always angers those who profit from delay. Ending line. They had survived the first wave, but the deeper change they sparked had just begun. And not everyone wanted to see that light spread further. It had been 3 months since the storm began. 3 months since a handwritten letter shook the walls of silence. 3 months since the world tried to turn a whisper of hope into noise, and failed. Now, it was quiet again, but not the same quiet. This one was stronger. This quiet had roots. In a small town near Chennai, a new tech lab was being inaugurated. No media, no red carpets, just a clean white room full of students who didn't wait for instructions. They were already logged in, already building, already dreaming. I stood at the front not as a guest, but as the first youth mentor of the One Light program. Her voice didn't tremble anymore. "We started with a letter," she told the room. "Now, we write our future." Outside that building, 2 cars parked quietly, one behind the other. From one stepped Sundar Pichai, from the other, Narendra Modi. No aides, no press, just 2 men who had walked through fire and chosen not to bow. They didn't shake hands right away. Instead, they looked at the children through the window, and then, with no plan, no ceremony, they walked side by side to the back of the school, where there was a small garden bench shaded by neem trees. They sat. No one followed. No one dared, and for 3 minutes, again, they said nothing. Birds chirped softly. A breeze moved the leaves that felt like the first meeting all over again. And yet it wasn't silence, because this time, they carried something more than burden. They carried proof. "It stayed," Sundar finally said. Modi didn't look at him. He just nodded. "They tried to stop it," Sundar added, "but it stayed." Modi took a deep breath. "Because it wasn't about us," he said. They both looked at the sky. Blue.com. Then Sundar pulled a small notebook from his pocket, hand-stitched, worn. He handed it to Modi without speaking. Modi opened the first page. Inside, dozens of children's letters, drawings, dreams. End. At the very back, a note in Sundar's handwriting. "For every time we were told, no, this is yes." Modi closed the book slowly, then reached into his own pocket. He pulled out something small and folded a tea stall bill, dated decades ago, his father's handwriting across it. He handed it to Sundar. "He used to say," Modi whispered, "serve every customer like he might one day lead a nation." Sundar didn't speak. He just bowed his head, slightly, and in that moment, 2 different stories, one from Silicon Valleys, one from railway platforms, felt like pages from the same book. They didn't talk about politics. They didn't talk about markets. They talked about their mothers, about old shoes, about standing in lines. About being told, "Wait your turn," by people who never thought they'd have one. And then Modi asked something unexpected. "Do you think we're still the boys sitting outside?" Sundar smiled softly. "Yes, but now we open the door." They sat in that garden for nearly an hour. No guards interrupted. No phone rang. Because sometimes, when you've spent your life in noise, the greatest gift is being able to sit in peace with someone who understands the cost of that silence. They stood to leave. A young girl from the tech lab came running out. She looked nervous, but she held a card in her hand. She offered it to Sundar. He read it. It said, "Thank you for not giving up." "We didn't either." He passed it to Modi. Modi read it twice, then bent slightly and said, "Keep writing. You never know who's listening." They walked back to their cars slowly. No speeches, no final words, but just before they stepped in, they paused. Sundar looked at Modi and said, "This isn't the end." Modi replied, "It never was." They both nodded, one's hand left in different directions. But the story didn't leave with them, because that night, a child in Kenya sent her first message to the One Light, One Letter platform. A boy in Nepal uploaded a video of his homemade solar-powered tablet holder. A girl in Gujarat coded her first mobile app inspired by Nivi. The movement had outgrown its creators. And maybe, that was the point all along. The silence that started between two men had become a voice for millions, and it kept growing. 3 years passed, not in silence, not in noise, but in steady movement. Across India and beyond, small classrooms began to change, not through speeches, not through policies, but through quiet letters. One by one, story by story, light by light. The One Light, One Letter program had grown into something no one could predict. By the end of year 1, it had reached 500 schools. By the end of year 2, it had reached 4,000. Now, in its 3rd year, it reached across countries Nepal, Kenya, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Cambodia. Even small villages in Brazil had joined the platform, but this wasn't about scaling. It was about something else. A kind of revolution no one could trace back to a single government or a single brand. And in the middle of it all, Nivi had grown. She was now 15. Not a girl of letters, but of action. She had spoken at 2 youth summits, not on stage, but in breakout rooms, where the quiet kids sit. She told them, "You don't need volume to be heard. You need clarity." Her name was now whispered among leaders of education, not as a hero, but as a symbol of what could happen when someone listens without waiting for applause. But as with all good stories, there comes a moment of full circle, and it came on a rainy morning in Delhi. Sundar Pichai was returning to India after years, not for a summit, not for an award. He came for a quiet visit to one particular schooler, new to integrated education center built in the name of the first letter. It wasn't a monument. Just a classroom built beside a field. But there was a plaque outside with 3 words, "You were heard." When Sundar arrived, he expected a short tour, but waiting inside the room was Nivi, now taller, more confident, holding a laptop in one hand and a worn envelope in the other. She didn't greet him with formality. She simply said, "I never gave this back." She handed him her original letter, the one she had written 3 years ago, which he had returned to her during one of their early video calls. "You should keep it," she said, "because you answered it." Sundar smiled and sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. Just like that first day with Modi, silence returned. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. This time, it was full nip. "I finally asked, what made you take that first step?" Sundar replied, "Because once, someone answered me when they didn't have to." Then he asked, "And you? What made you write that letter?" Nivi's eyes softened. "I saw your face on the news," she said. "You looked tired. And I thought maybe he needs a reason to keep going." For a moment, Sundar felt something rise in his chest. The world had always seen him as the one who gives, but they never knew how much he had been given back. Meanwhile, just outside the room, a car quietly pulled up. It wasn't announced. It wasn't planned. Narendra Modi stepped out, holding an umbrella. He was older now, not just in years, but in weight. Not political weight, emotional weight. He had seen dreams rise and fall, had made enemies by choosing empathy, but he had no regrets. He stepped into the classroom. Without formality, Sundar and Nivi stood, but he waved them down. Don't stop. I just came to listen. They sat together, three people from three different corners of the world. An old tea seller's son, a boy who once waited for a phone to ring, and a girl who wrote one letter. They didn't talk about the program, or the politics, or the pressure. They talked about fear, about loneliness, about the price of kindness in a world that often rewards cruelty. Modi spoke about the day he almost resigned, when the attacks were too much and the voices too loud. Sundar talked about the moment he almost signed that letter of distance. Niv shared how her classmates once avoided her in the hallway, calling her the puppet. And in that moment, sitting there in a room powered by solar energy and hope, they realized something. You don't change the world by winning arguments. You change it by staying soft in hard places, by speaking when it's easier to be quiet, or by sitting in silence when words would only make it worse. Just before they stood to leave, Nivi asked a final question. Do you think it's enough? Sundar turned to her. What do you mean? The stories, the letters, the labs. Will it really change the world? Modi answered first. Maybe not the whole world, but it changed mine. Sundar nodded. Double quotes in mine, he added. Then both turned to her. What about you? She looked out the window. Children were running under the light rain, holding books over their heads, laughing. Some held tablets, others just held hands. Yes, she said quietly. It's enough. As they left the classroom, Sundar paused by the plaque again. He added one more line beneath it, scribbled in his notebook, and you answered back. Later that week, Nivi received a surprise envelope at her doorstep. Inside, one small note written in two scripts, Tamil and Hindi. In silence, you spoke for millions, and they heard you. There was no signature, but she knew who it came from, and she didn't frame it. She tucked it into her backpack, because she still had more to do, and many more letters to answer.